Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. This is Shocking Stories and Twisted Tales. This is the first video in the series. I think there's three, by Cadaver. But this is the second video, and this video will run until here. Nope, it's not what I wanted to do. Stop. Okay, so, yep, don't do what I just did. This video will run until here. It's going to be 12 minutes. And then the final... See, I don't want to cut it off in the middle. I mean, the last video is going to be 12 minutes, or the next video will be 12 minutes. We'll just cover this one, because I know that Darsh Patel one. It's pleasant. Alright, without further ado, before we get started, if you could click that thumbs up, that helps me tremendously. Subscribe to the channel, that helps me tremendously. 2 easy, simple little clicks of the button. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button. You can request a video, your name will be sponsoring that video. You can donate and not have me do anything, or you can just request a video. Request videos in the comment section. It's the easiest way. I'm a small channel, so I'm able to read all my stuff, and it'll take a little bit more time before I get to the regular requests, but I try my best to get to everyone. Okay, let's get into the video.
The story of Dorothy Jane Scott sounds like something straight out of a modern horror movie, and when I was reading her story, I couldn't help but see the comparisons in her story to that of a plotline from a movie that we have all seen at one point or another. What happened to her was both horrifying and had a sense of drama to it, or something straight out of Hollywood. Dorothy Jane Scott was one of those people who was just naturally kind and caring, being described by her family and friends as someone who very much wanted to live a quiet life.
Sorry, I dropped my my deck of cards because I was going to get a drink, and I knocked them off the table. I was listening, but I want to go back just so people don't think I was purposely trying to avoid it. I know he said her life was like a horror story, so let's just go back. Okay.
Drama to it, or something straight out of Hollywood. Dorothy Jane Scott was one of those people who would, and when I was reading her story, I couldn't help but see the comparisons in her story to that of a plotline from a movie that we have all seen at one point or another. What happened to her was both horrifying and had a sense of drama to it, or something straight out of Hollywood. Dorothy Jane Scott was one of those people who was just naturally kind and caring, being described by her family and friends as someone who very much wanted to live a quiet life, being devoted to both her religion and her son. Dorothy was a single mother living in Stanton, California. She was 43 years old and worked 2 jobs to support herself and her son. From everyone who knew Dorothy, nothing seemed out of place in her life. She was simply an independent and caring woman who was doing her best to make ends meet and not live a life in the spotlight. She was known to never drink, do drugs, or even date that often, according to her parents, which is what made the series of events that led to May 28, 1980 even more shocking. But before I get there, I need to go back a few months, 3 to be exact, to show what all Dorothy had been going through and how her life went from normal to a living nightmare. It all started when Dorothy began receiving phone calls from a stranger, a man claiming to know where she was always, her daily routine, where she lived, worked, and even where her parents lived. Dorothy was aware that she had a stalker, but unfortunately, back in the 80s, stalking was not taken that seriously. At least nowhere near how it is today. And even today, from stories personal friends of mine have told me, if you have a stalker, you must jump through so many hoops to have anything done about it that it almost makes the entire ordeal not even worth the energy. Dorothy may have known this to be the case as well, even back then, because for several months she had been receiving these phone calls. The calls would range from devotion to rage. The caller would never stay on the line for long, but when he did call, he was either confessing his love for her or telling her that he was going to harm her. It got so bad that police got involved and installed a recorder on her phone line, but as I just mentioned, the calls were so short that there was never a way for them to trace the call. One of the biggest scares that Dorothy went through came a few weeks after installing that recorder. Dorothy's phone rang, and the voice told her to go outside because he had something for her. Dorothy, both scared and angry, went outside and quickly saw that on her car's windshield was a dead rose. And it didn't stop there either. About a week later, Dorothy received another call from the stranger who claimed that he would get her alone and, in his words, cut her up into little bits so no one would ever find her. It had gotten so bad by...
That doesn't sound like a stalker. That sounds like a potential murderer who just happens to be stalking you. I think that's a little more of a pressing issue. Stalkers are bad, but I think somebody who's threatening to murder you has crossed that line and should be dealt with to the extreme. Especially if it's, if it's a guy, pair of channel locks right on the testicles, grab a hold of both of them and just start twisting. I'm sure that would feel wonderful. That's a way to stop someone.
At this point that Dorothy had started to take up karate lessons for self-defense and was considering purchasing a handgun. Why this really impacts me with researching this topic is it went from a woman who would seemingly never have harmed anyone to now being someone who must consider going to these measures to ensure her protection. I am not saying that she is wrong or going overboard by doing this. I just found it sad how much this woman had to alter her life because of this stranger who was tormenting her. All of this finally led to May 28, 1980. That night, while at a work meeting, Dorothy noticed that one of her coworkers seemed very sick. Come to find out, her coworker, Conrad Bostrom, had been bitten by a spider. Being the thoughtful and caring woman that Dorothy was, she, along with another coworker, Pam Head, took Conrad to the hospital for treatment. While there, it was reported later by Pam that Dorothy never left her side, and that while they were there waiting, they sat beside each other and Dorothy appeared to be behaving normally. After Conrad was treated, Dorothy said that she would go outside to pull the car up so he wouldn't have to walk that far in his condition. Pam stayed behind to wait with Conrad, and when Pam and Conrad walked out of the front entrance, they saw Dorothy's car, and the next thing they knew, the car turned on its high beams and sped past Pam and Conrad. The car then made a sudden turn out of the parking lot and took off down the road. Now at this moment, Pam had no knowledge of what was going on with Dorothy and her stalker. In fact,
she didn't tell the people she worked with? Oh, Dorothy. You gotta tell people you work with. Tell people you work with so the people you work with can walk you to your car, can follow you home. Make sure you get in safe. Go in the house with you. Walk around. It's a burden for everyone involved, but the alternative is you could be at a hospital with two friends, co-workers, and then you go to do the right thing, which is just go get a vehicle and pull it up closer so the person doesn't have to walk, and this stalker gets you in the parking lot. Dorothy. Is that her son? It makes it worse. Or daughter.
Neither Conrad or Pam even reported Dorothy as missing until hours later, and this was because they had originally thought an emergency could have happened with Dorothy's son, and that is why she left in such a hurry. However, when Pam found out a few hours later that nobody had seen Dorothy, the police were notified. Around 4:30 a.m. on May 29th, around 5 hours after Dorothy was last seen, her car was found 10 miles away from the hospital, engulfed in flames, and no sign of Dorothy was ever reported that morning or in the following days. 2 weeks after Dorothy's disappearance and apparent abduction, the phone calls began again, but this time it was to Dorothy's mother, Vera. The call started with,
"Are you related to Dorothy Scott? Well, I've got her."
Following these phone calls, Vera began to receive them almost every Wednesday afternoon, and with the more the stranger called, the more details he told to Vera. One example being that on the night Dorothy disappeared, before she got to the hospital, she actually ran by her house to change scarves. She was originally wearing a thinner black scarf. She later changed it for a thicker red one. The stranger told Vera that he knew the color scarf that she was wearing when she went to her work meeting, that she went home to change, and then what she was wearing when he took her. This was among other details that the caller gave Vera that were not given to the media, incriminating him more in being responsible for Dorothy's nightmare and eventual abduction. During this time in the following weeks since Dorothy went missing, the police were adamant on Vera and Jacob, Dorothy's parents, to not give any details to the media as it could severely hinder the case. But with no progress seeming to be made, Jacob Scott finally gave in and contacted the local newspaper to spread some information about the case in hopes of getting some answers to finding his daughter. The day a newspaper ran the story, Vera received a phone call from the same man, and he finally gave some insights as to why he did what he did. He claimed that he and Dorothy were in a relationship, and that she was cheating on him. This was never proven, or even known for that matter. Vera and Jacob didn't know much about Dorothy's dating life, and had no idea of if what the caller was saying was true.
I got a question if they were dating, because I don't know many women that would stay in a relationship with somebody who calls them up and says they're going to cut them into little pieces. Any women out there, you tell me. If you were dating me, and I called you and said, I'm going to cut you into several hundred pieces, are you going to hang up and get all tingly and be like, oh, he loves me? Oh, no. You're going to be on the phone with the police. You're going to hang up on me so you can call the cops and say, yeah, hey, I need you to do me a favor and get this stupid idiot to leave me alone. He just threatened to kill me, to cut me up into little pieces. It's much different today, obviously, but still.
Or not. Although they did lean on the side of not believing him simply because they knew their daughter and wouldn't see why she would keep a relationship secret. Granted, it could be possible, but it could also be that this stalker felt betrayed by Dorothy, that she may have gone on a date with another man, and she truly may have never even known who the stalker was. But to him, she belonged to him, and he saw any potential man as a threat. The case of Dorothy stayed cold for another 4 years following the discovery of her car. Yet that whole time, Vera still received phone calls. For 4 years, the stranger, seemingly never tiring of the pain that he continued inflicting on the family. Things seemingly changed though in April of 1984, when yet again another call was made to Vera. Yet this time, Jacob answered the phone and the caller immediately hung up. For the next several months, the calls seemingly stopped. That was until August 6th, 1984. When skeletal remains were found near a construction site, the odd thing that was noticed by police was that there were 2 sets of bones, one human and the other belonging to a dog. The dog remains were seemingly buried on top of the human remains. The bones showed signs of being burned, which told police that they had been there for at least 2 years, as in 1982 there had been a fire in that area. The remains were eventually able to be identified as belonging to Dorothy Jane Scott. The dog bones are a mystery still to this day, as Dorothy did not own a dog, and neither did her parents. There was also a ring found with the remains that was later identified by Vera as belonging to Dorothy, as well as a watch that had stopped at 12:32 a.m. on May 29th.
It could have been the person's dog, and if he was holding her, as he was saying, and she got attached to the dog, I don't know the size of the dog, but if he was allowing the dog to be around her and she got attached, and then maybe he just attacked her, and the dog tried to defend her, you know, whatever size dog, he just killed the dog too, and just burned him. You know, took it as, well, that dog, you know, it turned on me, so I had to kill it. That's my rationale.
Just an hour after Dorothy originally disappeared. The location of where the remains were found was around 10 miles from where Dorothy's car was discovered. Having some closure that they could finally, at least, bury their daughter, Vera and Jacob still continued to receive phone calls from the one claiming to be responsible for what happened. One day, Vera received yet another phone call, and the caller simply asked,
Is Dorothy there?
Since 1984, there have been no breakthroughs on the case of Dorothy Jane Scott. Sadly, both Vera and Jacob have since passed away, never knowing justice and never being able to identify the one responsible. However, there is one theory on this matter. While there is nothing concrete or any viable proof that it happened, it was enough for people to run with it as a theory. There was a man named Mike Butler who is believed by Dorothy's son to be the one responsible for what happened to his mother. The reason for his name even being mentioned was that Mike Butler had a sister who worked with Dorothy. From several accounts, many said that Mike had become obsessed with Dorothy. He was described as a very unstable man who was said to have been involved in cult activities. This fueled the theory even more, given that many say the remains of both dog and human remains were cult-like in nature. Another important part of this theory was that Jacob had actually met Mike on several occasions and spoken with him. This played into the theory of why the caller hung up when Jacob answered the phone, since if it was in fact Mike who was making these calls, then he feared Jacob would recognize his voice. This I can see as being a reason why. After all, he had no issue calling and taunting Vera for years, but the moment Jacob answered the phone, he hung up and then didn't call again for months. The theory goes further and says that the reason for what happened to Dorothy on the night she disappeared was because Mike saw her leaving work with Conrad. He assumed that she was with another man, and that could have sent him over the edge. Yet all of this is speculation, and even though police were well aware of him, there was no concrete evidence linking Mike to this crime. Mike Butler died in 2014, so there is little they can do on that end anyway. If Mike was the one responsible, or if it was someone completely different, then hopefully one day this case can be marked as closed. But until then, the story of Dorothy Jane Scott will continue to live on in this state of limbo.
Oh, that's sad. That is sad. Well, this is a short one, but I don't want to break the next one up, you know, in half. And whether this one's a short one, the last one will be a short one. So this is a little break in between. If I remember, maybe I'll drop a third video. Oh, maybe I'll put this one out during the first week of September. I'm dropping 10 videos a day. I'm going crazy. So I'll probably do that. I'll probably drop this video then. There you go. Well, I hope you could help solve that case. But until next time, try to have a good day, have a good night. And don't kill anyone. Or call them and do stuff like that. This is bad.